The morning
I
sun
can't believe this
filtered
is
through the
happening.
grimy
Please,
windows
you
of
have to
Riverside
help me.
Diner, casting
Oh,
long
God.
shadows across the checkered linoleum floor. Elena Morrison pushed through the heavy glass door at 5:45, 15 minutes before her shift officially began. She always arrived early. Early meant fewer questions from her coworkers about the dark circles under her eyes or the way her hands trembled when she poured coffee. The diner smelled of bacon grease and burnt toast, familiar scents that should have been comforting, but only reminded her how trapped she felt. She tied her apron with practiced movements, fingers fumbling slightly with the strings. Through the kitchen window, she could see Jerry already working the grill, his weathered face concentrated on the sizzling hash browns. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again and again, 12 missed calls, all from the same number, all from Garrett. She silenced the phone without looking at the voicemails. She couldn't, not yet. Not when she needed to get through the morning rush without falling apart. Her ex-husband's voice had a way of crawling under her skin, making her feel small and worthless even through a recording. The early morning regulars began trickling in. Old Joe settled into his corner booth, newspaper already spread before him. The truck drivers grabbed their usual counter seats, comparing notes about road conditions and delivery schedules. Elena moved between them like a ghost, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, forcing smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Across town, in a small house with peeling blue paint and a sagging front porch, Judith Morrison woke to the sound of her own coughing. The 76-year-old woman sat up slowly in bed, one hand pressed against her chest, where her heart beat irregularly beneath fragile ribs. The morning light revealed a bedroom filled with memories. Photographs of Elena as a child lined the dresser. A wedding photo from 32 years ago sat face down in the back corner, hidden but not quite discarded. Judy shuffled to the kitchen, her slippers scuffing against the worn hardwood floors. The house felt too quiet without Elena, who had moved out 6 months ago after finally leaving Garrett. Her daughter visited every evening after work, bringing groceries and worried looks, but the daytime hours stretched long and empty. The older woman moved to the window, gazing at her beloved rose bushes in the front yard. They needed pruning. The weeds were taking over. She should do it herself, but the doctor had been clear. No strenuous activity. Rest. Take your medications. Don't stress your heart. But sitting idle while her garden died felt like giving up, and Judith Morrison hadn't raised a daughter by giving up on things that mattered. Back at Riverside Diner, the morning rush hit at 7:30 sharp. The bell above the door chimed constantly as construction workers, nurses coming off night shift, and early commuters flooded in. Elena moved on autopilot, her body going through motions her mind had memorized years ago. Coffee, eggs, toast, hash browns, smile. Repeat. She didn't notice the man who walked in at 7:45. He was impossible to miss, really. 6'4", broad-shouldered, with a salt and pepper beard and hands that looked like they could crush steel. His leather vest bore patches that told a story. Hell's Angels, Road Captain, chapters in 3 states. The kind of man most people instinctively stepped aside for. Cole Westwood settled onto a stool at the far end of the counter, away from the clusters of chattering customers. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone acutely aware of his own size and the intimidation it could cause. His weathered face showed every one of his 48 years lines, carved by sun and wind and choices both good and bad. When Elena approached with a coffee pot, he simply nodded and turned his mug right side up. No pleasantries, no attempt at conversation. Just a man who wanted his coffee and to be left alone. She appreciated that more than he could know. The morning wore on. 8 o'clock became 8:30. The crowd began to thin as people headed to their jobs, their lives, their normal Tuesday routines. Elena wiped down tables and refilled sugar dispensers, her phone a constant weight in her pocket. She knew without checking that more calls had come. More messages. More of Garrett's voice telling her she was nothing without him, that she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, that she belonged to him, whether she liked it or not. At 8:45, her phone rang again. This time it didn't stop. Elena glanced around the diner. The breakfast rush had passed. Only a handful of customers remained, including the silent biker nursing his third cup of coffee. She caught her coworker Sarah's eye and gestured toward the storage room. The back room smelled of industrial cleaner and cardboard. Metal shelves lined with canned goods and paper products rose toward the water-stained ceiling. A single bare bulb cast harsh shadows. Elena leaned against the cold concrete wall, her heart pounding as she finally answered the call. Garrett's voice came through like poison. Smooth at first and almost loving the way it always started. "Elena, baby, why won't you talk to me?" She closed her eyes. "I'm at work, Garrett. I can't do this right now." "Can't do this? Can't talk to your husband?" His tone shifted, the sweetness curdling into something darker. 30 years we were together, 30 years, and you think you can just walk away. We're divorced. The papers were finalized 4 months ago. You know this. Papers, he spat the word. Papers don't change what we are, what you are. Mine, Elena. You're mine. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. "Please, Garrett, I just need you to leave me alone. Leave Mom alone. We're not doing this anymore." "Your mother," his laugh was cruel. "How is dear Judy still sick? Must be hard for her all alone in that house. Anything could happen to a fragile old woman living by herself." Terror gripped Elena's chest, squeezing until she couldn't breathe. "Don't, please don't hurt her." "Hurt her, I would never hurt my mother-in-law. But accidents happen, don't they? Houses get broken into. Old people fall downstairs. It would be such a shame if something happened because you were being stubborn. Please don't hurt my mom." The words came out as a whisper, broken and desperate. "Please, Garrett, she's done nothing to you. If you're angry, be angry at me, but leave her alone." She didn't know the storage room door hadn't completely latched, didn't realize how sound carried in the quiet diner. Didn't see the way the big man at the counter had gone very still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Cole Westwood heard everything. He heard the fear in her voice, the desperation, the way she begged for her mother's safety with a kind of terror that came from knowing the threat was real. In that moment, listening to a woman plead for her mother's life in the storage room of a roadside diner, something shifted in Cole's chest. He knew that fear, had heard it before in another voice, another woman, and another time, when he'd been too late to help. Elena emerged from the storage room 5 minutes later, her face pale and drawn. Her hands trembled as she picked up the coffee pot, trying to fall back into the routine of work. But nothing felt normal anymore. The walls seemed to press in. Every sound made her jump. She could feel the weight of Garrett's threats settling onto her shoulders like stones. She approached Cole's spot at the counter, forcing herself to focus on the simple task of refilling his cup. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was deep, gravelly, but surprisingly gentle. Elena nodded without meeting his eyes. As she poured, her hand shook so badly that coffee splashed onto the counter. A few drops hit the sleeve of his leather vest. "I'm so sorry." She grabbed a towel, mortified. "I'm not usually this clumsy. Let me—" "It's fine." Cole's hand, massive and scarred, gently stopped her frantic cleaning. "You okay?" The kindness in the question nearly broke her. She pulled back, clutching the coffee pot like a shield. "I'm fine, just tired. Long week." Cole didn't push. He simply nodded, his gray eyes holding a depth of understanding that made Elena want to cry. He left a $10 bill for a $6 check and walked out without another word. But as he swung his leg over his motorcycle in the parking lot, Cole Westwood made a decision. The Hells Angels had a code, one that went deeper than brotherhood or territory or any of the rough justice the club was known for. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Stand up for the vulnerable. Be the shield between the innocent and those who would do them harm. He'd failed that code once before, 5 years ago, with his little sister, Emily. He wouldn't fail again. The rest of Elena's shift passed in a blur. She dropped a plate in the kitchen, the crash making everyone jump. She mixed up 2 orders, bringing scrambled eggs to a customer who'd ordered pancakes. Sarah covered for her, shooting concerned looks that Elena pretended not to notice. When her shift finally ended at 2:30, Elena's whole body ached with exhaustion that had nothing to do with being on her feet for 9 hours. She gathered her purse and headed out to her aging Honda in the parking lot, mentally preparing for the drive to her mother's house. She needed to check on Judy, make sure Garrett hadn't made good on his threats. The motorcycle was waiting by her car. Cole Westwood leaned against his bike, arms crossed, looking like some kind of rough-edged guardian angel. When Elena approached, keys clutched tight in her fist, he straightened up. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said. "Just wanted to make sure you got to your car safe." Elena's first instinct was fear. Strange man, parking lot, but something in his steady gaze, the careful way he kept his distance, made her pause. I'm fine, she said, the automatic response she'd given everyone for years. I heard you in the storage room. Cole's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. The phone call, the threats. Shame flooded through Elena, hot and terrible. You shouldn't have. That was private. I know, and I'm sorry, but someone threatening to hurt your mother, that's not something you should face alone. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know you don't know me, got no reason to trust me, but I'm offering help if you need it. Why? The question came out sharper than Elena intended. Why would you care? Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. I had a sister, Emily. She was in a situation like yours, bad marriage, abusive husband. She was scared, but she thought she could handle it on her own. He looked away, jaw tight. I found out too late. By the time I knew how bad it was, she was already gone. He killed her 5 years ago, beat her so bad she didn't make it to the hospital. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Me too. Cole met her eyes again. I left the Angels after that. Couldn't be part of the Brotherhood when I'd failed my own blood. But the code stuck with me. Protect those who can't protect themselves. I couldn't save Emily, but maybe I can help you. The sincerity in his words cut through all of Elena's defenses. She wanted to accept, wanted to collapse into the offer of protection like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline. But she'd learned long ago that accepting help often came with strings attached. I can't drag you into my mess, she said finally. You don't know what Garrett's like. He's not going to just back off because someone tells him to. Then we make him back off. Cole pulled a card from his vest pocket, handed it to her. A phone number scrawled in heavy black marker. You call me, anytime, day or night. If he shows up, if you feel threatened, if you just need someone to check on your mom, I'll be there. Elena took the card with shaking fingers. Part of her wanted to throw it away to insist she could handle this herself. But the larger part, the part that was terrified and exhausted and so very tired of being alone, held on to it like a talisman. Thank you, she whispered. Cole nodded and walked back to his motorcycle. The engine roared to life, powerful and somehow reassuring. As he pulled out of the parking lot, Elena stood by her car card clutched in her hand and wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd found an ally in the strangest of places. She drove to her mother's house with the card tucked in her pocket and Cole's words echoing in her mind. The next morning, Wednesday, Cole returned to Riverside Diner at 7:45 sharp. He took the same seat at the end of the counter, ordered the same black coffee, and watched Elena move through her shift with the same practiced invisibility. When her break came at 9:30, she approached his spot hesitantly. You came back, she said. Told you I would. Cole gestured to the empty stool beside him. Got time to sit? Elena glanced around. The morning rush had passed. Sarah could handle the remaining customers. She perched on the stool, feeling awkward and grateful in equal measure. My mom's okay, she said, needing him to know. I stayed with her last night. Garrett didn't show up. Good, but he will try again. Men like him always do. Elena's fingers twisted together in her lap. He's been calling, texting, driving past the house. It's been like this since the divorce. Sometimes I think it'll never end. How long were you married? 30 years. The number felt obscene. 3 decades of her life given to a man who'd slowly crushed everything good inside her. I married him when I was 22. He was charming at first, protective, made me feel special. But after we got married, things changed. Slowly at first. He didn't like me seeing my friends, wanted to know where I was all the time, controlled all the money. Cole listened without interrupting, his presence solid and calm. It got worse over the years. The yelling, the accusations, making me feel worthless. Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He never hit me. That sounds stupid, right? Like it wasn't that bad because he never actually hit me, but the threats were always there. The way he'd get in my face, how he'd punch walls next to my head. I lived in constant fear for so long, I forgot what normal felt like. It's not stupid, Cole said firmly. Abuse is abuse. Doesn't matter if he left bruises you could see. The ones on the inside count too. Elena looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Past the intimidating exterior, the leather and patches and road-worn toughness, she saw understanding, compassion, the kind of empathy that only came from knowing real pain. "Why did you leave the Angels?" she asked. Cole was quiet, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "The Brotherhood taught me a lot. Loyalty, honor, standing up for what's right. But after Emily died, I couldn't be part of it anymore. Felt like a fraud. All those years wearing the patch, talking about protecting our own, and I couldn't protect my own sister." He shook his head. "I needed to find a different way to live. Started working as a mechanic, quiet life. But the code stayed with me. When I heard you yesterday begging for your mother's life, something clicked. Maybe I can't bring Emily back, but I can make sure you don't end up like her." "I'm not your responsibility," Elena said softly. "No, but helping people who need it, that's a choice I'm making. For me as much as for you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the diner humming with morning energy around them. Elena felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just relief at not being completely alone anymore. "My mom would like you," she said finally. "She's always been a good judge of character." Cole smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I'd like to meet her if that's okay." "Yeah," Elena said. "I think that would be okay." The peace lasted exactly 2 more days. Friday evening, Elena was closing up her section at the diner when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up from wiping down a booth and felt her heart stop. Garrett Morrison stood in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun. 54 years old, still handsome in a sharp-edged way, dressed in the expensive business casual that had always made him feel superior to everyone around him. His eyes found Elena immediately, and the smile that crossed his face made her blood run cold. "There's my wife," he said loud enough for the remaining customers to hear. Elena's coworker Sarah stepped forward. "Sir, we're about to close. I just need a minute with my wife." Garrett's tone was pleasant, reasonable, the voice he used when he wanted people to think he was the good guy. "Elena, honey, we need to talk." "We're divorced, Garrett." Elena forced herself to stand straight, even as her legs trembled. "You need to leave." "Divorced." He said it like the word was funny. "You really think a piece of paper changes what we are? 30 years, Elena. 30 years of marriage doesn't just end because you filed some paperwork." He started walking toward her, and Elena instinctively backed up. The booth pressed against her legs. Garrett kept coming, his approach slow and deliberate, predatory. "I've been patient," he continued, his pleasant mask starting to slip. "Given you space. Let you have your little rebellion. But enough is enough. It's time to come home." "I'm not coming home. That was never my home. It was a prison." Garrett's face darkened. "A prison I gave you everything, a house, security. You never had to work until you decided to throw a tantrum and leave. You controlled every aspect of my life. You isolated me from everyone I cared about. You made me feel worthless for 3 decades. I made you feel," Garrett laughed sharp and cruel. "Always playing the victim, aren't you, poor Elena? Never takes responsibility for anything." The remaining customers were watching now, the diner gone silent, except for Garrett's rising voice. "You need to leave," Elena repeated, hating how her voice shook, "or I'll call the police." "Call them. Tell them your husband came to talk to you. See how seriously they take that." Garrett moved closer, backing her against the booth. "You think you're free of me? You think you can just move on? I know where you work, where your mother lives. I know your schedule, your routines, everything. You're not free, Elena. You'll never be free." The diner door opened. Cole Westwood filled the doorway, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the checkered floor. He took in the scene with one sweep of his gray eyes. Garrett crowding Elena, her terrified expression, the way she'd pressed herself back as far as she could go. "She asked you to leave," Cole said, his voice low and steady. Garrett spun around, sizing up the newcomer. "This doesn't concern you, friend. I'm not your friend. And when a man threatens a woman in my presence, it concerns me just fine." Cole walked forward, not hurrying, but each step deliberate. "You're going to walk out that door right now, and you're not coming back." "Or what?" Garrett puffed up, trying to match Cole's presence. "You'll make me. You know who I am. I could have you arrested for threatening me." Cole stopped 3 feet away. The difference in their size was stark. Garrett average height and build despite his expensive clothes. Cole towering and broad, carrying the kind of physical presence that came from years of hard living. I haven't threatened you, Cole said calmly. Just given you good advice. Take it. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Elena held her breath. Sarah had the phone in her hand, ready to call 911. The remaining customers watched like they were witnessing a showdown in an old Western. Finally, Garrett stepped back, but his eyes never left Elena. This isn't over, he said, his voice vibrating with barely controlled rage. Not even close. You can't hide behind this thug forever. He turned and stalked out of the diner, the door slamming behind him hard enough to make the windows rattle. Elena's legs gave out. She sank onto the booth bench, her whole body shaking. Sarah rushed over, putting an arm around her shoulders. Cole stayed where he was, giving her space, but remaining alert, watching through the window as Garrett's luxury sedan peeled out of the parking lot. Are you okay? Sarah asked. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. After a moment, she looked up at Cole. How did you know to come? I didn't. Just came by to check on you. He pulled out the stool across from her booth, sat down carefully. Good timing, I guess. He's not going to stop. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. This is how it's been for months. He shows up at my work, drives past my mom's house, sends flowers with threatening notes. The police say there is nothing they can do unless he actually does something. Cole's jaw tightened. What about a restraining order? I looked into it, but I need evidence of threats or violence. Text messages might not be enough. Then we get evidence. Cole leaned forward, his expression serious. You don't have to do this alone anymore, Elena. I meant what I said. I'm here to help. Elena wanted to argue, to insist she could handle it herself, but the fear was too overwhelming, the relief at having someone on her side too powerful to deny. Okay, she whispered. Okay. That night, Cole followed Elena to her mother's house. They didn't discuss it. He simply got on his motorcycle and rode behind her Honda, a silent guardian, making sure Garrett didn't try anything on the drive. Judith Morrison's house sat on a quiet street lined with old oak trees. The blue paint was fading, the porch sagging slightly, but flower beds out front showed signs of loving care. Cole parked his bike on the street and walked Elena to the door. Come in, Elena said. Please, I'd like you to meet my mom. The inside of the house was modest but clean, filled with the kind of clutter that came from a long life well lived. Photographs covered every surface. Crocheted blankets draped over worn furniture. The smell of lavender and old books hung in the air. Judith sat in a recliner by the window, an oxygen tube in her nose, a mystery novel in her lap. When Elena and Cole entered, the older woman looked up with bright, intelligent eyes that reminded Cole achingly of his own mother. Mom, this is Cole Westwood, Elena said. He's been helping me with the Garrett situation. Judith studied Cole with the kind of thorough assessment only a mother could deliver. He stood still under her scrutiny, letting her look her fill. Hell's Angels, Judy said, finally nodding at his vest. Don't see many of those in this neighborhood. No, ma'am, Cole agreed. Former member. I work as a mechanic now. Former, Judy seemed to approve of that distinction. What made you decide to help my daughter? Cole met her gaze steadily. I had a sister. She died in a situation similar to what Elena's facing. I couldn't help her, but I can help your daughter. The honesty in his answer seemed to satisfy Judy. She nodded slowly. Then I'm grateful you're here. That man Garrett, he's got a darkness in him. Has ever since Elena married him. I never liked him, but she was in love, and you can't tell young people in love that they're making a mistake. Mom, Elena protested softly. It's true, baby girl. You were 22 and thought he hung the moon. How was I supposed to know he'd spend the next 30 years trying to break you? Judy reached for Elena's hand. But you're out now. That's what matters. And if this young man wants to make sure you stay safe, I say let him. Cole felt something ease in his chest. Family approval, he realized. It mattered more than he'd expected. They spent the evening in Judy's living room. Elena made tea while Cole noticed the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet and the flickering light fixture in the hallway. He mentioned them casually, and before the night was over, he'd promised to come back Saturday to fix both. When Cole finally left at 9:30, he stood on the porch with Elena, the night air cool and filled with cricket song. Your mom's special, he said. She is. Toughest woman I know, even with a bad heart. Elena hugged herself against the chill. Thank you for today, for all of it. Nothing to thank me for. Get some rest. I'll come by tomorrow around 10 to take care of those repairs. Cole rode home to his small apartment above the auto shop where he worked, but his mind stayed at that house with the fading blue paint, with the scared waitress who was braver than she knew, and the sick mother who still had fire in her eyes. He thought about Emily, about all the ways he'd failed her, about the guilt that had haunted him for 5 years. Maybe this was his chance at redemption. Not to bring Emily back, but to make sure another woman didn't end up like her. To use the strength and skills he'd gained in the Angels for something good, something that mattered. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Cole showed up at Judy's house at 10 sharp, toolbox in hand. Elena was already there, having spent the night on the couch. She looked tired, but more relaxed than he'd seen her yet. While Cole worked on the repairs, Elena and Judy worked on a puzzle at the kitchen table. He listened to their easy conversation, the way they traded pieces in gentle teasing, the love evident in every interaction. "You're good with your hands," Judy observed, watching Cole tighten the cabinet hinge. "My late husband was like that. Could fix anything." "It's just practice," Cole said. "And knowing that if you don't fix things when they're small problems, they become big ones." Wise words. Judy coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Elena jump up to get her mother's inhaler. When the coughing fit passed, Judy waved off their concern. "I'm fine, happens all the time. Heart doesn't work like it used to, makes everything else struggle too." Cole noticed the way Elena's hands shook as she set down the inhaler, the fear in her eyes. She was already carrying so much weight. Her mother's declining health, Garrett's threats, financial stress from supporting 2 households. It was too much for one person. But she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. The weekend passed peacefully. No sign of Garrett, no threatening calls or messages. Elena almost let herself believe it might be over. Monday morning shattered that illusion. Elena arrived at work at her usual 5:45. The diner was still dark, Jerry not yet in to start the grill. She unlocked the door and flipped on the lights, starting her routine of setting up the coffee makers and checking the sugar dispensers. Her phone, which she'd left on silent overnight, showed 17 missed calls, all from Garrett. She deleted them without listening and tried to focus on work. But anxiety crawled under her skin, making her jumpy and distracted. Cole showed up at 7:45, same as always. The sight of him settling onto his usual stool made Elena's shoulders relax fractionally. The morning rush came and went. Around 9:30, as the crowd thinned, Cole gestured Elena over. "You look stressed," he said quietly. Elena glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Garrett called 17 times last night. I didn't answer, but I know he's planning something. It's been too quiet since Friday. We should talk to a lawyer, start the restraining order process. I don't know if I have enough evidence yet. A lot of calls, but no actual threats I can prove. We'll build the evidence, document everything, every call, every text, every time he shows up somewhere he shouldn't be." Cole's gray eyes were steady, confident. "You're not helpless, Elena. You're gathering ammunition." The words settled something in Elena's chest. She wasn't helpless. She was preparing, building a case, taking control of her own safety. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." The days that followed fell into a new pattern. Elena worked her shifts at the diner. Cole showed up every morning, a silent presence that made her feel protected. In the evenings, she stayed with her mother, and Cole often stopped by to help with small repairs around the house. A broken fence, a leaking faucet, a loose step on the back porch. Garrett continued calling and texting, but Elena didn't respond. She saved every message, documented every call, built her case one piece of evidence at a time. On the 8th night, everything changed. Elena had fallen asleep on her mother's couch, too tired to make the drive back to her own small apartment across town. Judy was in her bedroom, door-closed, oxygen machine, humming softly. At 11:17, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet night. Elena jerked awake, heart hammering. For a moment, she thought she dreamed it. Then she heard heavy footsteps in the kitchen, the crash of dishes hitting the floor. "Elena," Garrett's voice slurred and angry. "I know you're here. Get out here and face me." Terror locked Elena's muscles. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock the screen. More crashes from the kitchen. Garrett was destroying things, working himself into a rage. Elena pulled up Cole's number and hit the panic button feature he'd installed on her phone. One press would alert him and 2 of his most trusted former angels. Then she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My ex-husband broke into my mother's house. He's here now. He's drunk and angry, and I don't know what he'll do. Elena whispered into the phone, trying to stay quiet. Judy's bedroom door opened. The older woman stood there in her nightgown, confusion and fear on her face. Elena, what's happening? Mom, stay in your room. But Judy was already moving into the hallway, heading toward the kitchen where Garrett was still shouting and breaking things. Garrett spotted his former mother-in-law. This is your fault. You poisoned her against me, turned my own wife into a stranger. Garrett Morrison, you're drunk and you're trespassing, Judy said with more courage than her frail body should have been able to muster. You get out of my house right now before the police arrive. The police? You called the police on me. Garrett advanced on Judy, rage distorting his features. I'm her husband. I have every right to be here. Elena rushed into the hallway. Garrett, please, just leave. You're drunk. You'll regret this tomorrow. Regret? He spun to face her. The only thing I regret is marrying a worthless, ungrateful woman who threw away 30 years like it meant nothing. It meant nothing because you made it hell. The words burst out of Elena before she could stop them. 30 years of you controlling every aspect of my life, telling me I was worthless, that I'd be nothing without you, making me afraid to even talk to my own mother without your permission. That's not a marriage. That's a prison sentence. Garrett's face went dark red. You little... He lunged forward, but Judy stepped between them. The 76-year-old woman, no more than 5'2" and maybe 100 pounds, put herself in the path of her daughter's raging ex-husband. You leave my daughter alone, she said. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Garrett shoved Judy hard, both hands on her shoulders. The older woman stumbled backward, her frail body unable to keep balance. She fell, her head connecting with the corner of the heavy wooden coffee table with a sickening crack. Judy crumpled to the floor and didn't move. Mom! Elena's scream tore from her throat. The sound of motorcycles roared outside. Tires screeched. Heavy boots pounded up the porch steps. Cole burst through the front door, Dane and Bear right behind him. He took in the scene instantly. Judy on the floor, Elena dropping to her knees beside her mother. Garrett standing there, the rage draining from his face as he realized what he'd done. Get out, Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. Right now. For once, Garrett didn't argue. He backed toward the kitchen, then turned and ran, crashing through the back door and disappearing into the night. But Cole wasn't focused on him. He was already kneeling beside Judy, checking her pulse while Elena cradled her mother's head. She's breathing, Cole said. Pulse is weak but steady. We need an ambulance. Already called, Bear said from the doorway phone to his ear. Judy's eyes fluttered open. Elena. I'm here, Mom. Don't move. Help is coming. He pushed me. Judy's voice was barely a whisper. I tried to protect you, baby girl. I know you did. Tears streamed down Elena's face. You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights painted the walls as police cars and an ambulance pulled up outside. The next hour passed in a blur of paramedics and questions, and Elena riding in the back of an ambulance, holding her mother's hand while they rushed toward the hospital. Judy had a sprained wrist, bruised ribs, a mild concussion. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation, especially given her heart condition. Elena sat in the emergency room waiting area, still shaking her mother's blood on her shirt. Cole sat beside her, a solid presence in the chaos. This is my fault, Elena whispered. I should have known he'd escalate. Should have protected her better. This is Garrett's fault, Cole said firmly. Not yours. He made the choice to break in, to threaten you, to put his hands on a 76-year-old woman. Those are his choices, his crimes, not your responsibility. A police officer approached with a clipboard. Ms. Morrison, I need to take your statement. Elena recounted everything. The broken window, Garrett's threats, how he'd pushed her mother. The officer wrote it all down, his expression grim. We'll file charges for breaking and entering, assault, and violation of the peace. Given that he fled the scene, a warrant will be issued for his arrest. What about a restraining order? Cole asked. She can file for one tomorrow. With this incident, she'll likely get it approved. After the officer left, Elena sagged against Cole. I'm so tired, so scared. When does this end? Soon, Cole promised. We're going to end this. The next morning, Elena met with a lawyer named Catherine Brennan. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, Catherine listened to Elena's story with growing outrage. We'll file for an emergency restraining order today, Catherine said. With the assault on your mother, the breaking and entering, and your documented history of harassment, you should qualify. The hearing will be scheduled within 72 hours. Over the next 3 days, Elena and Cole worked together to build the strongest case possible. They compiled every text message, every call log, every instance of Garrett showing up uninvited. Cole provided a written statement about what he'd witnessed. The diner's manager pulled security footage showing Garrett's confrontation with Elena. Judy, released from the hospital with strict orders to rest, insisted on providing her own statement despite her daughter's protests. He assaulted me in my own home, the older woman said firmly. I won't let him get away with it. On day 15, after that first morning when Cole had overheard Elena's desperate plea, they went to court. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and tall windows. Elena walked up the steps in her only good dress, Cole and Catherine on either side of her. Her hands shook, but she kept her head high. Inside, the courtroom smelled of old wood and furniture polish. The judge, a severe-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the case file while Elena sat at the plaintiff's table. Garrett arrived with his own lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit. He'd cleaned up well wearing a business suit and an expression of wounded innocence. When he saw Elena, he mouthed, "I'm sorry," across the courtroom. Elena looked away. The hearing began. Catherine presented their evidence methodically. The text messages where Garrett had threatened to visit Judy. The security footage from the diner. Cole's testimony about the confrontation. The police report from the break-in. Photos of Judy's injuries. Garrett's lawyer countered with character witnesses. Colleagues who swore Garrett was a good man. Friends who claimed Elena was exaggerating. He presented Garrett as a heartbroken husband who'd made one mistake while intoxicated. My client deeply regrets his actions, the lawyer said smoothly. He was drunk, emotional, and not thinking clearly. But this was an isolated incident. Mr. Morrison has already enrolled in an anger management program. He's committed to getting help. When it was Elena's turn to testify, she walked to the stand on shaking legs. Catherine guided her through her statement. Can you describe your marriage to Mr. Morrison? Catherine asked. Elena took a breath, forcing herself to speak clearly. It was 30 years of him controlling every part of my life. He decided what I could wear, who I could see, how I spent money. He made me believe I was worthless without him, that I couldn't survive on my own. When I finally found the courage to leave, he started harassing me, calling constantly, showing up at my work, threatening my mother. And the night of the incident, he broke into my mother's house. He was drunk and angry. When my mother tried to defend me, he pushed her so hard she fell and hit her head. She could have died. Garrett's lawyer cross-examined, trying to poke holes in her story, but Elena held firm, her voice gaining strength with each answer. Finally, the judge called for closing arguments. Catherine made a passionate plea for the restraining order. Garrett's lawyer insisted it was an overreaction to one regrettable incident. The judge was silent for a long moment, reviewing her notes. Mr. Morrison, she said finally, you broke into a private residence while intoxicated. You assaulted a 76-year-old woman who was defending her daughter. These are serious crimes that will be addressed in criminal court. However, regarding the restraining order, Elena held her breath. I'm granting a temporary 30-day order of protection. Ms. Morrison, you are to have no contact with Mr. Morrison during this period. You will file additional evidence and return in 30 days for a hearing on a permanent order. Your Honor, Catherine stood. Given the severity of the assault, counsel, I've made my ruling. The temporary order will give Ms. Morrison protection while you build a stronger case for permanent restriction. 30 days. Use them well. The gavel came down. Elena felt like she'd been punched. 30 days. Just 30 days. Not the permanent protection she'd hoped for. Not real safety. Outside the courtroom, Catherine tried to be reassuring. This is actually good. Temporary orders are easier to extend into permanent ones. We use the next 30 days to document any violations, gather more evidence, build an unbreakable case. But Elena barely heard her. She walked down the courthouse steps in a daze, feeling like she'd lost, even though technically she'd won something. Cole caught up to her in the parking lot. Hey, look at me. Elena raised her eyes to his face. This isn't over, he said, but it's not a loss either. 30 days. We make them count. We document everything. And when we go back, we get that permanent order. Okay. What if 30 days isn't enough? Elena's voice broke. What if he comes back worse? Then we'll be ready. I promise you, Elena, we'll be ready. That night, Elena sat in her mother's living room. Judy was asleep in her bedroom, worn out from the stress of the past weeks. Elena stared at the temporary restraining order on the coffee table, the same table her mother had hit when Garrett pushed her. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 30 days wife. I'll be counting every one. See you soon. Fear turned her blood to ice, but underneath it, something else began to stir. Anger. Determination. She'd spent 30 years afraid of Garrett Morrison. She'd let him make her feel small and worthless and trapped. No more. Elena picked up her phone and called Cole. He just texted me, she said when he answered. Threatening message from a new number. Screenshot it, save it, add it to the file. I will. But Cole, I'm done being afraid. Whatever happens in the next 30 days, I'm fighting back. I'm not letting him win. Good, Cole said, and she could hear the approval in his voice. Because he's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. Elena ended the call and stared at the restraining order again. 30 days to build an unbreakable case. 30 days to transform from victim to survivor. She'd spent 3 decades being broken down. She could spend 30 days building herself back up. Outside, the night was quiet. Stars glittered in the clear sky. Somewhere out there, Garrett was planning his next move, counting down the days until the temporary order expired. But Elena was planning too, and she wasn't alone anymore. She had Cole, she had her mother, she had Catherine. She had a case to build, and evidence to gather, and 30 days to prove that she was stronger than Garrett had ever let her believe. The war wasn't over. But Elena Morrison was done running. The fight had just begun. The temporary restraining order became Elena's lifeline and her torment. 30 days, 720 hours, 43,200 minutes between her and whatever Garrett would do when the protection expired. She bought a composition notebook at the drugstore on day 22. Black and white marbled cover college-ruled pages. It became her evidence journal, a chronicle of every violation, every threat, every moment Garrett couldn't let go. Day 22, 7:43 in the morning. Phone call from blocked number. Didn't answer. Voicemail. 29 days left, Elena. Hope you're enjoying your freedom while it lasts. Day 23, 2:15 in the afternoon. Silver Mercedes spotted 3 houses down from Mom's place. License plate matches Garrett's car. Drove past slowly twice. Dane following on motorcycle confirmed sighting. Day 24, 9:30 at night. Text from new number. That restraining order is just paper. Paper burns. Elena documented everything in neat handwriting, adding timestamps and witness names when applicable. Catherine had told her to be thorough. So she was thorough. Meticulous. Building her case one entry at a time. Cole showed up at Riverside Diner every morning at 7:45 sharp. He'd become as much a fixture as the coffee pot and the permanent smell of bacon grease. The regulars had stopped staring at the big biker. Old Joe even nodded at him now, a silent acknowledgement that Cole belonged. On day 25, during her morning break, Cole slid a small paper bag across the counter. What's this? Elena asked. Pepper spray. Legal. Easy to use. Keep it in your pocket. Elena turned the canister over in her hands. It was small black, surprisingly heavy. I don't know if I could actually use this. You could if you needed to. Cole's gray eyes were serious, but having it might make you feel safer. That's worth something. She clipped it to her keychain, a small weight that somehow made the world feel less threatening. The evenings fell into a pattern. Elena worked her shift, then drove to her mother's house. Cole or one of his friends was always there, a quiet presence that made sleep possible. Dane Harper, tall and lean with a ponytail streaked with gray, took the evening shifts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Bear McCoy, built like his nickname suggested, covered Mondays and Wednesdays. They didn't talk much, these former Hells Angels. Just nodded when Elena arrived, accepted coffee if she offered, and kept watch from the porch or the driveway. She tried to pay them, but Cole had shut that down immediately. We take care of our own, he'd said. You're ours now. The words had made something warm bloom in Elena's chest. After 30 years of being Garrett's possession, being claimed by these rough men felt different, protective, chosen. She was theirs because she wanted to be, not because someone had decided she belonged to them. On day 27, Cole showed up at the house with something new. Thought we could work on some basics, he said, gesturing to the backyard. Basics of what? Self-defense. Just a few moves. Ways to get away if someone grabs you. Elena's first instinct was to refuse. She wasn't a fighter, never had been. But then she thought about Garrett's hands on her shoulders when he'd cornered her at the diner, the way she'd frozen helpless. Okay, she said. Show me. They worked in Judy's backyard while the older woman watched from her chair on the porch, oxygen tube in place, but eyes bright with interest. Cole was patient, breaking down each movement into simple steps. Someone grabs your wrist, you don't pull away. That's what they expect. You rotate toward their thumb, the weakest part of their grip, and twist free, like this. His large hand circled her wrist gently. Elena followed his instructions, rotating and pulling. His grip released easily. Again, Cole said, muscle memory matters more than strength. They practiced for an hour. Wrist releases, how to strike if she had to, where the vulnerable points were on a human body. Cole never grabbed too hard, never made her feel threatened. Each movement was a gift, a piece of knowledge that shifted the power dynamic fractionally in her favor. You're stronger than you think, he said as they finished. Most people are. Elena rubbed her wrists, feeling the ghost of his gentle grip. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about muscle, it's about knowing you have options. Before today, someone grabbed your wrist, you might have frozen. Now you know how to get free. That's power. From her chair, Judy called out, when I was young, my mother taught me to carry a hat pin. Said any man who got fresh would find steel in his hand. She laughed, the sound turning into a cough. Times were different then, but the principle's the same. Women have always had to protect themselves. Elena helped her mother inside when the coughing wouldn't stop. Judy's pills arranged in a 7-day organizer rattled as Elena fetched them. So many pills for one fragile body. Blood thinners, heart medication, diuretics, the physical evidence of a life winding down. I'm okay, baby girl, Judy said, catching Elena's worried look. The coughing's normal. Dr. Holloway said so. But Elena saw the way her mother's hands shook taking the pills. The gray tinge to her skin, the way she needed to rest after even small activities. Garrett wasn't just threatening Elena. Every day of stress, every moment of fear was stealing time from Judy's already limited reserves. Day 30 arrived with a crash. Elena was closing up her section at the diner, the evening shift winding down. Only a few customers remained nursing coffee and pie. Sarah was counting out the register. The kitchen staff were cleaning the grill. The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. Elena spun toward the front windows. Nothing. Then another crash, louder, closer. The sound came from the back of the diner, from the alley where they took out the trash. What was that? Sarah's voice was sharp with alarm. The manager, Pete, grabbed his phone and headed toward the back door. Elena followed, her heart hammering. Through the door's window, she could see her Honda Civic in the employee parking area. Every window was shattered. Glass glittered across the asphalt like scattered diamonds. Her windshield was a spider web of cracks. The driver's side mirror hung by wires. And across the hood, scratched deep into the paint, 2 words, 20 days. Call the police. Pete said, his face grim. Don't touch anything. Elena stood frozen, staring at the destruction. 20 days. Garrett was counting down, making sure she knew he was counting down. The police came, filed a report, took photos, said the same thing they always said. Without a witness, without proof, it was Garrett specifically, there wasn't much they could do. The restraining order prevented him from contacting her directly, but proving he'd vandalized her car was another matter. We'll add it to the file, the officer said, not unkindly. Keep documenting everything. Cole arrived before the police left Bear right behind him. They'd been having dinner at a bar 3 blocks away when Bear's police scanner app had picked up the call. You okay? Cole asked, his hand steady on Elena's shoulder. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her car, her only reliable transportation between work and her mother's house. Destroyed because Garrett wanted to remind her that he could reach her anywhere. I'll drive you to your mom's, Cole said. We'll deal with the car tomorrow. The ride through town on the back of Cole's motorcycle should have been terrifying. Instead, Elena found it oddly calming. The rumble of the engine, the cool night air, Cole's solid presence in front of her. She wrapped her arms around his waist and let the world blur past. At Judy's house, they found the older woman dozing in her chair, the television playing quietly. Elena gently woke her, helped her to bed, tucked her in, like Judy had done for her when she was small. "Love you, baby girl," Judy murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "Love you too, Mom." Elena returned to the living room to find Cole standing at the window looking out at the dark street. "He's escalating," Elena said quietly. 20 days left, and he's already destroying my property. What's he going to do when the order expires? We're not waiting that long." Cole turned from the window. "Tomorrow we talk to Catherine about moving up the permanent hearing. Use the car vandalism as evidence that he's an ongoing threat. Will that work?" "It has to." Cole stayed that night sleeping on the couch with his boots within reach and his phone on the coffee table. Elena tried to sleep in the guest room, but lay awake for hours listening to the house settle and her mother's labored breathing through the walls. Day 31 dawned gray and cold, promising rain. Elena called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She couldn't face the diner, couldn't pretend everything was normal, while her car sat in the parking lot like a monument to Garrett's rage. Catherine Brennan listened to Elena's update with a frown. "The vandalism helps our case, but without direct proof it was Garrett, it's circumstantial. Judges like concrete evidence." "The message scratched into the hood said 20 days, Elena argued. "That's a countdown to when the restraining order expires. Who else would do that?" "I agree, but Garrett's lawyer will argue it could be anyone. Maybe someone you upset at the diner. Maybe random vandalism." Catherine tapped her pen against her notepad. "We keep building the case. Every violation, every threat, it all adds up. By the time we go back to court, the pattern will be undeniable." The next week crawled past. Garrett's harassment became a constant background noise in Elena's life. Blocked calls, strange cars driving past the house, anonymous emails to her work address claiming she was unstable, that she'd made up the abuse. On day 33, the diner manager, Pete, called her into his office. "I got an email today," he said, his usually jovial face serious. "Someone claiming to be a concerned friend said you've been erratic, unreliable, that you might be dangerous to work with." Elena's stomach dropped. "That's not true. Pete, you know me. I've worked here for 4 years, I know." Pete held up his hand. "I'm not firing you, Elena. Hell, you're one of my best waitresses. But I need you to know someone is trying to sabotage you. Figured you should be aware. It's my ex-husband. He's trying to destroy my life because I left him." Pete nodded slowly. "The one with the restraining order?" "Yeah, I figured. Listen, you need anything time off to deal with this, you let me know. We've got your back here." The kindness made Elena's throat tight. "Thank you." On day 35, Elena noticed the calls to Judy's landline. The older woman mentioned them casually while Elena was making dinner. "Someone keeps calling and hanging up," Judy said. "Must be 4 or 5 times today. I thought maybe it was a telemarketer with a bad connection, but they never say anything. Just breathe for a few seconds and hang up." Elena's blood ran cold. "What time were the calls?" "Let's see, one around 10 this morning, a couple more after lunch. Last one was maybe an hour ago." The times corresponded with when Judy would be alone, when Elena was at work and the rotating guard of bikers hadn't arrived yet. Garrett was checking her schedule, figuring out when Judy was vulnerable. "Mom, don't answer the phone unless you recognize the number." "But what if it's Dr. Holloway's office or your Aunt Linda?" "They'll leave a message. Please, Mom, just don't answer." Judy studied her daughter's face and nodded. "Okay, baby, if it makes you feel better." From that night, Elena added the calls to her notebook. Day 35, multiple hang-up calls to mother's landline during vulnerable hours. Witness, Judith Morrison. Cole read the entry and his jaw tightened. He's probing, testing security, trying to find a weak spot. "There is no security during the day," Elena said. "I'm at work. You guys have jobs. Mom's alone for hours." "Not anymore." Cole pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. "I've got a friend, retired cop. Does private security now. Owes me a favor. I'll see if he can do some daytime drive-bys." "Cole, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." His gray eyes met hers. "We protect our own Elena. How many times do I have to say it before you believe me?" She believed him. That was the terrifying part. After 30 years of Garrett's conditional love, his protection that came with strings attached, Cole's unconditional help felt too good to be true. But he kept showing up, kept fixing things, kept standing between her and the chaos Garrett wanted to create. On day 40, Elena's car was finally repaired. The insurance covered most of it, though. The deductible took a chunk out of her already tight budget. She drove it home from the shop with new windows and a fresh paint job, trying not to think about how easily Garrett had destroyed it. That evening, Cole suggested they go to Murphy's bar. "Why would we go to a bar?" Elena asked, confused. "Because that's where Garrett drinks, regular as clockwork, Tuesday and Friday nights. I think it's time he and I had a conversation." "Cole, no. If you confront him, it could make things worse." "I'm not going to touch him. Just talk." Sometimes men like Garrett need to understand there are consequences to their actions, that not everyone's afraid of them. Elena wanted to argue, but part of her desperately wanted Garrett to face someone who wouldn't back down. Someone who could look him in the eye and make him feel small the way he'd made her feel for 3 decades. "Okay," she said, "but I'm coming with you." Murphy's bar occupied a corner lot downtown, the kind of place with neon beer signs in the windows and peanut shells on the floor. Elena had been there exactly twice in 30 years, both times when Garrett had insisted she join him for some work celebration where he could show off his pretty wife. Now she walked in with Cole, his presence like a shield at her side. Garrett sat at the bar, expensive scotch in front of him, tie loosened, looking every inch the successful businessman, unwinding after a hard day. He didn't notice them at first. Then he turned and his eyes went wide. "What are you doing here?" The words came out loud enough to make nearby patrons look over. "Having a drink," Cole said mildly. He guided Elena to a booth with a clear view of the bar, but far enough away for privacy. "You got a problem with that?" Garrett's face reddened. He slid off his bar stool, swaying slightly. "This is my place. I've been coming here for 15 years. You can't just walk in and—" "It's a public bar," Cole interrupted. "Anyone can walk in, even people you don't like." Elena watched Garrett struggle with his rage. He wanted to make a scene, wanted to drag her out of the booth and demand she come home. But Cole's presence stopped him. The careful way Cole had positioned himself, the alertness in his posture. Garrett might be drunk, but he wasn't stupid enough to start a fight with a man who outweighed him by 50 pounds of muscle. "Elena," Garrett tried a different tactic, his voice softening. "Baby, can we talk? Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "No," Elena said, and her voice didn't shake. "The restraining order says no contact. You're violating it right now by talking to me. There's no judge here. No cops, just us. Don't I deserve a chance to explain?" "You had 30 years to explain. I'm done listening." Garrett's mask slipped. "You'll regret this. When that order expires, when your biker bodyguard isn't around, every second you'll regret treating me like this." Cole stood up slowly. His movement was unhurried, but the threat was unmistakable. "See that right there? That's the kind of thing that's going to land you in jail. You just threatened her in front of a room full of witnesses." "I didn't threaten anyone. I just said—" "We all heard what you said." The bartender, a grizzled man in his 60s, spoke up. "Garrett, you should probably settle your tab and head home. Sleep it off." Garrett looked around the bar, seeing for the first time that people were watching, judging. His sanctuary, the place where he played the successful businessman, had turned against him. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at Elena. "You hear me? This isn't over." He threw money on the bar and stumbled out the door, slamming behind him. Elena released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her whole body shook with adrenaline. "You did good," Cole said, settling back into the booth. "Stood your ground. Didn't give him what he wanted." "I thought I'd be more scared, but I just felt angry. Like, how dare he act like the victim when he's the one who destroyed everything?" "That's growth." Cole signaled the bartender for 2 beers. "You're not seeing yourself through his eyes anymore. You're seeing the truth." They stayed for 1 drink, then drove back to Judy's house. The porch light was on a beacon of home and safety. Inside, Judy was asleep in her chair, the television playing an old Western. Elena gently woke her mother, helped her to bed. When she returned to the living room, Cole was standing by the window again, his default position these days. "He meant what he said." Elena spoke quietly. "When the order expires, he's coming for me." Then we make sure the permanent order gets approved. And if he violates it, he goes to jail. And if he doesn't care about jail, if he's willing to risk everything just to hurt me. Cole turned from the window, his expression serious. Then I'll be here. Every day, every night, however long it takes. He doesn't get to hurt you, Elena. Not while I'm breathing. The intensity in his words made Elena's heart skip. This wasn't just about his sister anymore. Wasn't just about honoring a code. Something had shifted between them in the past weeks. Something neither of them had acknowledged yet. Why, she asked softly, why do you care so much? Cole was quiet for a long moment. At first it was about Emily, about redemption, about not failing another woman the way I failed my sister. He paused. But somewhere along the way it became about you, about who you are, the way you fight even when you're terrified, the way you love your mother, the strength you don't even realize you have. Elena's breath caught. Cole, you don't have to say anything. I'm not expecting anything. Just wanted you to know. He left before she could respond, the rumble of his motorcycle fading into the night. Elena sat in the quiet house, her mother's gentle snoring, audible from the bedroom, and pressed her hand against her chest where her heart beat too fast. She was falling for Cole Westwood. The realization should have terrified her. She had just escaped one relationship. The last thing she needed was to dive into another. But Cole wasn't Garrett. He didn't take. He gave. He didn't diminish her. He made her feel capable, strong, seen. Maybe when this was all over, there could be something there. Maybe she could learn what it felt like to be loved instead of owned. But first she had to survive the next 15 days. Day 45 arrived in the early hours of the morning with the sound Elena had learned to dread. Her mother's labored breathing, the wet rattle of failing lungs, the gasp of a heart struggling to beat. Elena jerked awake on the guest room bed, disoriented for a moment. Then she heard it again. A cry from Judy's room. Weak, pained. She ran. Judy was sitting up in bed, both hands pressed against her chest, her face gray in the dim light. The oxygen tube had fallen away. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Mom? Elena grabbed her phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers. I need an ambulance. My mother's having a heart attack. 76 years old. History of cardiac issues. Please hurry. The dispatcher's calm voice talked her through it. Get her comfortable. Don't let her lie down. Keep her calm. Ambulance is 6 minutes away. Elena knelt beside the bed, holding her mother's hand, feeling the irregular flutter of her pulse. Stay with me, Mom. Please stay with me. Help is coming. Judy's eyes met hers, and Elena saw fear there, but also something else. A message. I love you. I'm proud of you. Be strong. Don't you dare say goodbye, Elena choked out. You don't get to leave me yet. We have too much left to do. The garden needs planting. You promised to teach me your pot roast recipe. You can't go. The sound of sirens grew louder. Elena texted Cole with one hand while holding her mother with the other. Mom. Heart attack. Hospital. The response came within seconds. On my way, the paramedics arrived. Efficient, professional. They lifted Judy onto a stretcher, started an IV-attached monitors. Lena rode in the ambulance, her mother's hand clasped in both of hers. Severe myocardial infarction, one paramedic said into his radio. Female 76, history of CHF. BP dropping, ETA 4 minutes. The hospital was a blur of harsh lights and antiseptic smells. They took Judy straight to the cardiac unit. Elena tried to follow, but was stopped at the door. Family waiting room is down the hall, a nurse said gently. The doctors will update you as soon as they can. Elena stumbled to the waiting room, a space with uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. She sank into a seat, her whole body numb. This was her fault. All the stress of the past months, Garrett's threats, the constant fear, it had been too much for Judy's weak heart. The door opened and Cole walked in, still in yesterday's clothes, his hair mussed from sleep. He must have broken every speed limit to get here so fast. How is she? He asked. I don't know. They took her back, said they'd update me. Lena's voice cracked. This is because of me. The stress, Garrett, all of it. I should have protected her better. Cole sat beside her, his presence solid and grounding. This is not your fault. Judy has a heart condition. This was going to happen eventually. But not now, not like this. Not because she was so stressed she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Tears streamed down Elena's face. What if she doesn't make it? What if the last thing I ever said to her was, "Don't you dare say goodbye," and she goes anyway? Then she'll go knowing how much you love her, knowing you fought for her. That's not nothing, Elena. They sat in silence. Minutes crawled past, an hour, two. Other families came and went. A man whose father had chest pains. A woman whose sister had been in a car accident. All of them trapped in the same purgatory of waiting and hoping and praying. At 6:17 in the morning, a doctor in scrubs pushed through the door. "Family of Judith Morrison." Elena jumped up. "That's me. I'm her daughter. Your mother had a severe heart attack. We've performed an emergency procedure to place a stent in her coronary artery. She's stable now, but the next 24 hours are critical. Can I see her?" "She's in recovery, heavily sedated, but yes, briefly." The doctor led Elena through a maze of corridors to the ICU. Judy lay in a bed surrounded by machines, tubes running from her arms, monitors beeping steadily. She looked so small, so fragile. Nothing like the fierce woman who'd raised Elena single-handedly after Elena's father died. Elena took her mother's hand, carefully avoiding the IV. "I'm here, Mom. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay." Judy's eyes fluttered but didn't open. The machines beeped on, evidence of a life hanging in the balance. Elena stayed until a nurse gently told her visiting hours were over. They'd moved Judy to a private room once she was stable. Elena could come back this afternoon. Cole was still in the waiting room when she emerged. "She's alive, stable. They did surgery." "That's good. That's really good." Elena sank back into the uncomfortable chair. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, exhaustion hit her like a physical weight. "I can't keep doing this, Cole. I can't keep living in constant fear that Garrett's going to hurt someone I love. The restraining order expires in 5 days. 5 days, and then what? He's going to come after me, and Mom's too weak to survive another scare." "Then we end it," Cole said firmly. "We go back to court with everything we have, every call, every threat, your car, the hang-ups to Judy's house. Tonight's heart attack caused by months of sustained stress. We bury him in evidence so deep no judge can deny the permanent order. And if that's not enough," Cole met her eyes, "then I make sure he understands there are consequences. Real consequences. For hurting people I care about." The way he said "people I care about" made Elena's heart clench. She was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong. For just a moment, she let herself lean against Cole's shoulder, let his steady presence hold her up. They sat like that as the hospital woke around them. Shift changes, breakfast carts, the eternal rhythm of healing and hoping. At 9 in the morning, Elena's phone rang. "Catherine Brennan. I heard about your mother," the lawyer said. "How is she? Stable? Critical? They're not sure yet." "I'm sorry, Elena. I truly am." Catherine paused. "Listen, I know this is terrible timing, but Garrett was arrested last night." Elena sat up straight. "What?" "He showed up at the hospital around 7 this morning. Tried to get into your mother's room. Security stopped him and called the police. He violated the restraining order. They arrested him on the spot." Relief and rage warred in Elena's chest. "He came here to the hospital. He told the police he was just checking on his former mother-in-law. But the restraining order is clear. No contact means no contact. He spent the night in jail. He's being arraigned this morning." Elena felt Cole's hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "This is good," Catherine continued. "It strengthens our case considerably. Willful violation of a court order? Harassment. We can use this." After the call ended, Elena sat in stunned silence. Garrett had come here, to the hospital where her mother lay fighting for her life, had tried to get into Judy's room. "He's insane," she whispered. "He actually thinks he has the right to be here, after everything he's done." "He's desperate," Cole corrected. "Desperate people do stupid things, and stupid things get them caught." The next 2 days blurred together. Elena split her time between the hospital and home, sleeping in snatches, eating when Cole forced her to. Judy slowly improved, moving from critical to stable to guarded. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. On day 48, Judy woke up. Elena was sitting by her bed reading aloud from one of her mother's favorite mystery novels when Judy's fingers twitched in hers. Elena. Judy's voice was barely a whisper, rough from the breathing tube. Mom. Oh, thank God. Don't try to talk. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Judy's eyes focused on her daughter's face. You look terrible. Elena laughed a sound half sob. Thanks, Mom. You don't look so great yourself. What happened? You had a heart attack, emergency surgery, but you're strong. You made it through. Judy absorbed this, her eyes drifting to the machines surrounding her bed. Garrett. He tried to come to the hospital, got arrested for violating the restraining order. A small smile crossed Judy's face. Good. Serves him right. She squeezed Elena's hand weakly. Fight him, baby girl. Don't let him win. I won't. I promise. That evening when Cole came to drive Elena home, Judy was awake and alert enough to properly meet him for the first time since the attack. So you're the guardian angel, Judy said, her voice still weak but her eyes sharp. Just a mechanic who likes helping people, Cole replied. Don't be modest. Elena's told me everything you've done. Judy studied him with a mother's assessing gaze. You love my daughter. It wasn't a question. Cole didn't flinch from it. And yes, ma'am, I do. Elena's breath caught. They hadn't said it, hadn't acknowledged what was growing between them, but hearing Cole say it so simply, so honestly made it real. Good, Judy said. She deserves someone who sees her worth, who fights for her instead of tearing her down. She paused. You take care of her, you hear me? When this is over, when Garrett is finally out of our lives, you make sure she remembers how to be happy. I will, Cole promised. On day 51, with Judy stable enough to be moved to a regular room, Catherine called with news. The permanent restraining order hearing has been moved up. Day 59, 1 week from now. The judge reviewed the evidence of Garrett's arrest and agreed we need to resolve this quickly. 7 days, 1 week between Elena and permanent protection, or 1 week until everything fell apart. Elena sat in her mother's hospital room that night watching Judy sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The monitors beeped steadily. Life continuing, hearts beating, hope surviving. In her purse, Elena's evidence notebook sat heavy with documented proof of Garrett's harassment. 43 entries, 43 violations, 43 reasons why she needed protection. Cole sat in the chair by the window, keeping watch even here. He'd barely left her side since Judy's heart attack. Elena watched him in the dim light, this unlikely savior who'd walked into her life and refused to leave. Cole, she said softly. He looked over, the gray eyes questioning. Thank you for everything, for being here, for believing me when I could barely believe myself. You don't have to thank me, Elena. I know, but I want to. She paused, gathering courage. What my mom said earlier about you loving me, did you mean it? Cole held her gaze steadily. Every word. I'm not ready yet for anything. I'm still trying to find myself again after 30 years of losing myself to Garrett. I know, and I'm not going anywhere, however long it takes. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I think I could love you too, eventually, when I'm whole again. You're already whole, Elena. You just needed to remember it. They sat in comfortable silence, two people finding each other in the midst of chaos. Outside the hospital window, the city lights glittered. Somewhere out there, Garrett was waiting, counting down, planning. But for the first time in 30 years, Elena wasn't afraid of what came next. She had Cole. She had her mother still fighting, still alive. She had evidence and a lawyer and a court date. Most importantly, she had herself. The woman she'd forgotten how to be. The strength she'd always possessed but never believed in. 7 days until the hearing. 7 days until freedom. Elena Morrison was ready to fight for it. Day 53 dawned clear and cold, the kind of November morning that promised frost before evening. Elena stood in her mother's hospital room, helping Judy into the wheelchair the nurses had brought. After a week in intensive care, the doctors had finally cleared Judy to go home with strict instructions. Rest, limited activity, no stress. Elena almost laughed at that last one. No stress, as if that were possible with the permanent restraining order, hearing looming in 6 days. I can walk, Judy protested as Elena adjusted the blanket across her lap. Doctor's orders, Mom. Wheelchair to the car. I had a heart attack, not a lobotomy. My legs work fine. But Elena noticed how her mother's hands trembled on the armrests, how the short walk from the bed to the wheelchair had left Judy breathless. The heart attack had aged her mother a decade in a week. Cole waited in the parking lot with his truck, having borrowed it specifically so Judy wouldn't have to navigate getting on and off a motorcycle. He lifted the older woman into the passenger seat with surprising gentleness, treating her like something precious and fragile. The drive to Judy's house was quiet. Elena followed in her Honda, watching Cole's truck ahead of her. The way he took corners, carefully avoided potholes, drove like he was carrying the most valuable cargo in the world. At the house, Baron Dane had been busy. The porch steps had new railings. The front door opened smoothly on hinges that no longer squeaked. Inside, someone had stocked the refrigerator and left a vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Judy noticed everything with wet eyes. You boys didn't have to do all this. Yes, ma'am, we did, Dane said simply. Family takes care of family. They settled Judy into her favorite recliner, the oxygen machine humming softly beside her. Elena fussed with pillows and blankets until her mother swatted her hands away. Stop hovering, I'm fine. The doctors wouldn't have let me leave if I wasn't fine. But Elena had seen the discharge papers, the long list of medications, the warnings about what to watch for, signs of another heart attack, symptoms that required immediate emergency care. Her mother's life had become a series of potential catastrophes waiting to happen. That afternoon, while Judy napped, Elena and Cole sat at the kitchen table surrounded by evidence. Catherine had requested they organize everything for the hearing. Make it easy for the judge to see the pattern, the escalation, the relentless harassment. Elena opened her composition notebook to the first entry. Day 22. Her handwriting looked shaky, uncertain. By day 51, the entries were neat and precise. The transformation of her own confidence visible in ink. 43 documented violations, she said, counting through the pages. Calls, texts, drive-bys, the car vandalism, showing up at the hospital. It has to be enough. It's more than enough. Cole was sorting photographs into chronological order. But we're not taking chances. Catherine wants character witnesses too. People who've seen what Garrett's put you through. Elena thought about it. Sarah from the diner had already agreed to testify about the confrontation she'd witnessed. Pete, the manager, would speak to the threatening emails sent to her workplace. Dr. Holloway would discuss the toll the stress had taken on Judy's health. Do you think the judge will see it? Elena asked quietly. The whole picture? Or will she just see a bitter ex-wife trying to punish her ex-husband? She'll see a woman fighting for her life and her mother's safety. That's what anyone with eyes will see. Over the next 3 days, they prepared. Catherine came to the house each evening after work, drilling Elena on her testimony. What to say, how to say it. The importance of staying calm even when Garrett's lawyer tried to rattle her. He'll paint you as vindictive, Catherine warned, unstable, a woman who can't let go of a failed marriage. You need to stay composed, factual. Let the evidence speak for itself. What if I freeze? What if I get up there and can't remember anything? Then you look at me, take a breath. We've been over this 100 times. You know your own story better than anyone. On day 56, 3 days before the hearing, Cole took Elena to the backyard for what he called confidence training. We're going to practice something, he said, standing in the middle of Judy's small lawn. Practice what? Saying no without apologizing, without explaining. Just no. Elena blinked. That's it. Try it. I'll ask you something, you say no. Ready. Cole put on an exaggerated, serious expression. Elena, will you give me your car? No. The word came out automatically, but Elena heard herself add, I need it for work, and stop, just no. Don't explain. Don't justify. Try again. Cole switched tactics. Elena, you need to come back to me. Our marriage was good, and you know it. Elena's stomach clenched at the echo of things Garrett had actually said. No, because you controlled. Elena, just no. That's a complete sentence all by itself. One more time. They practiced for 20 minutes. Different scenarios, different demands. Each time Elena worked on saying no, without softening it, without making excuses, without trying to explain herself into being understood. Why does this matter? She finally asked, frustrated with herself. for how hard it was. Because in court, Garrett's lawyer is going to ask you questions designed to make you defensive, to make you over-explain. People who over-explain sound like they're lying even when they're telling the truth. You need to be able to state facts and leave them standing. Elena understood. 30 years of marriage to Garrett had trained her to justify every decision, explain every choice, apologize for taking up space. Learning to simply say no to state truth without decoration was learning a new language. By the time they finished, she was exhausted, but felt something shift inside her. A boundary solidifying, a line she wouldn't cross anymore. That evening, Elena sat with her mother while Judy picked at her dinner. The older woman had little appetite since the heart attack, pushing food around her plate more than eating it. "You nervous about Friday?" Judy asked. "Terrified," Elena admitted. "What if it's not enough? What if the judge doesn't grant the permanent order?" Judy set down her fork, fixing Elena with a steady look. "Then you keep fighting. You file again. You document more. You don't stop until you're safe." She paused. "But I don't think that's what scares you most." "What do you mean?" "You're scared of what happens after, when Garrett's really gone, when you have to figure out who Elena Morrison is without fear defining every choice." Judy's eyes were gentle. "That's terrifying in a different way. Building a life instead of just surviving one." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "How did you do it?" "After Dad died, how did you figure out who you were alone?" "I was never alone, baby girl. I had you. That gave me purpose, direction." Judy reached for Elena's hand. "But you get to build something just for yourself. That's a gift. Scary as hell, but a gift." Day 59 arrived with heavy clouds and the smell of coming snow. Elena woke at 5 in the morning, her stomach churning with nerves. The hearing was set for 9. She had 4 hours to get ready to armor herself for battle. She dressed carefully. The navy suit Catherine had helped her pick out. Simple gold earrings that had been her mother's. Minimal makeup. Hair pulled back in a neat bun. The woman in the mirror looked competent, professional, strong. Elena barely recognized her. Cole arrived at 7:30 to drive them to the courthouse. Judy insisted on coming despite her doctor's protests. "I'm testifying," she'd said firmly. "That man pushed me down in my own home. I'm looking the judge in the eye and saying so." Catherine met them on the courthouse steps, her briefcase heavy with evidence. "Ready?" "No," Elena said. Then remembering Cole's training, "But I'm doing it anyway." The courtroom was smaller than Elena expected. Wood-paneled walls, high windows, the kind of space designed to make people feel the weight of justice. She took her seat at the plaintiff's table, Cole and Judy directly behind her in the gallery. At 8:55, Garrett walked in. He'd dressed for the occasion too. Expensive charcoal suit, silk tie, the uniform of a successful businessman. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Douglas Winters, carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd won more cases than he'd lost. Garrett's eyes found Elena immediately. He smiled, not threatening, almost gentle. The smile he used to use when he wanted something, when he was trying to manipulate her into believing he was the reasonable one. Elena looked away. At 9 sharp, the bailiff called, "All rise." Judge Margaret Crawford entered, a severe woman in her early 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. She settled into her seat, reviewed the case file, then looked up. "We're here for the matter of Morrison versus Morrison. Petition for permanent restraining order." Her voice was crisp, no nonsense. "Counselor Brennan, you may begin." Catherine stood. "Your Honor, my client, Elena Morrison, seeks a 5-year restraining order against her ex-husband, Garrett Morrison. Over the past 59 days, Mr. Morrison has engaged in a pattern of escalating harassment threats and violence that culminated in a serious assault requiring my client's mother to undergo emergency cardiac surgery." She laid out the case methodically. The temporary order granted on day 15, the violations that followed, each piece of evidence presented with dates, times, witnesses. The composition notebook entered as Exhibit A, 43 entries documenting Garrett's relentless campaign of intimidation. We have text messages threatening arson, witnesses to multiple confrontations, video evidence of property destruction, a hospital security report of Mr. Morrison attempting to access a restricted patient room in direct violation of the existing order. Catherine's voice grew stronger. "This is not a case of a difficult divorce. This is a case of a dangerous man who cannot accept that his ex-wife has the right to live free from fear. Douglas Winters stood for his opening statement. Your Honor, what we have here is a woman scorned. My client Garrett Morrison was married to the petitioner for 30 years, 3 decades of partnership. When Mrs. Morrison filed for divorce, my client was devastated. He made mistakes. He'll admit that. He drank too much, said things he regrets. But harassment, violence. These are gross exaggerations from a woman determined to paint herself as a victim. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Catherine's hand on her shoulder steadied her. The temporary order was based on one incident where my client, admittedly intoxicated, entered a home he'd visited hundreds of times during his marriage. An unfortunate accident occurred. Mrs. Morrison's mother fell, but there was no intent to harm, no malice, simply a tragic accident during an emotional confrontation. Judge Crawford made a note. We'll hear testimony. Mrs. Morrison, please take the stand. Elena walked to the witness box on shaking legs. The bailiff swore her in. She placed her hand on the Bible and promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. As if she'd ever been allowed to tell the truth before. Catherine approached with a gentle smile. Mrs. Morrison, can you describe your marriage to the defendant? Elena took a breath, remembered her training, state facts, don't over-explain. I married Garrett Morrison when I was 22 years old. For the first few years, he was charming, attentive, but gradually he became controlling. He managed all our finances. I had to ask permission to spend money. He decided where we lived, what I wore, who I could see. Did this escalate over time? Yes, he isolated me from friends and family, monitored my phone calls, accused me of cheating if I spoke to male cashiers at the grocery store. The verbal abuse became constant. He called me stupid, worthless, said I'd be nothing without him. Did he ever physically harm you during the marriage? He never hit me directly, but he'd punch walls next to my head, throw things, break furniture. I lived in constant fear that the next time it wouldn't be the wall. What made you finally leave? Elena met Garrett's eyes across the courtroom. I realized I'd spent 30 years disappearing, becoming smaller and quieter. I didn't recognize myself anymore. When my mother got sick and needed help, I had to make a choice. Keep disappearing until there was nothing left, or find the courage to leave. Tell us what happened after the divorce was finalized. Elena detailed the escalation, the constant calls, the threats, the confrontation at the diner where Cole had to intervene, the vandalized car, the hang-up calls to her mother's landline. And the incident on day 8, can you describe what happened? Garrett broke into my mother's house late at night. He was drunk and angry. He destroyed property. When my mother tried to defend me, he shoved her so hard she fell and hit her head on the coffee table. She was 76 years old with a serious heart condition. He could have killed her. Catherine entered the hospital records. The police report photos of Judy's injuries. One final question, Mrs. Morrison. Are you afraid of your ex-husband? Yes. Elena's voice was steady. I'm afraid he'll hurt me or my mother. I'm afraid he'll never stop. I'm afraid that without protection, one of us won't survive the next confrontation. Thank you. No further questions. Douglas Winters stood for cross-examination. He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Mrs. Morrison, you say you were afraid of my client during your marriage, yet you stayed for 30 years. Why is that? I was afraid. Fear is why I stayed. Really, or did you stay because the lifestyle was comfortable? My client is a successful businessman. You lived in a nice home, never had to work, had everything provided for you. I didn't have everything provided. I had everything controlled. But you could have left at any time. You had family, your mother, yet you chose to stay. Doesn't that suggest the marriage wasn't as terrible as you're now claiming? Elena felt the trap. He was trying to make her defensive, to make her explain herself. No, she said simply. Winters blinked. No. You asked if it suggested the marriage wasn't terrible. No, it doesn't suggest that. Fear and abuse make people stay in dangerous situations. That's well-documented psychology. Winters shifted tactics. These text messages you've submitted as evidence. How do we know you didn't send these to yourself? Create a false narrative. Catherine stood. Your Honor, the text came from phone numbers registered to Mr. Morrison. Cell phone records confirm this. Overruled. The witness may answer. I didn't send them to myself, Elena said. Why would I? Perhaps because you want revenge against my client for the divorce you initiated. Perhaps you're angry he moved on. I'm not angry he moved on. I'm angry he won't let me move on. The cross-examination continued for 20 more minutes. Winters tried every angle, suggested Elena was unstable, vindictive, making up stories for attention. Each time Elena stuck to facts, refused to be drawn into emotional responses or over-explanations. Finally, Winters returned to his table. No further questions. Catherine called her next witness. Sarah from the diner described the confrontation she'd witnessed. Pete testified about the harassing emails. Dr. Holloway explained how sustained stress had contributed to Judy's heart attack. Then it was Judy's turn. The older woman walked to the stand, slowly, still weak from her hospitalization. She settled into the chair with visible effort, but her eyes were fierce. Catherine kept the questioning simple. Mrs. Hayes, what happened on the night of day 8? Garrett Morrison broke into my home while I was sleeping. I heard him destroying things in the kitchen. When I came out to see what was happening, he was screaming at my daughter, blaming everyone but himself for the divorce. I told him to leave. He refused. When I stepped between him and Elena, he shoved me with both hands. I fell backward and hit my head on the coffee table. Were you injured? Sprained wrist, bruised ribs, concussion. But the worst injury came later. The stress of the constant harassment, the fear for my daughter's safety, contributed to my heart attack. I had emergency surgery, nearly died. Judy looked directly at Garrett. That man has done more damage to my family than he'll ever admit. Winters declined to cross-examine. What could he say? Judy's hospital records spoke for themselves. Cole testified next, describing his observations over the past weeks. The surveillance. The confrontation at Murphy's bar. Garrett's pattern of escalating behavior. You're a former member of a motorcycle gang, correct? Winters asked during cross-examination. Hell's Angels, yes. Former. So you're hardly an impartial witness. You have a romantic interest in Mrs. Morrison, don't you? I care about her safety. That's not the same as being impartial or not. And you've appointed yourself her protector, despite having no legal authority to do so. I offered help. She accepted. That's how helping people works. Winters tried to paint Cole as a vigilante, someone with his own violent past. But Cole remained calm, factual. His testimony stood. By 11:30, all witnesses had been heard. Catherine rested her case. Now it was Garrett's turn to present his defense. Winters called character witnesses, business associates who swore Garrett was professional, a neighbor who claimed Garrett was always polite, his own sister who testified he'd been a good brother. Then Winters made a strategic decision. Your Honor, I'd like to call Garrett Morrison to the stand. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected this. Neither had Elena. Garrett took the stand, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. He looked every inch the wronged husband. Sad, regretful, reasonable. Mr. Morrison, Winters began, can you describe your marriage to the petitioner? It was the best 30 years of my life. Garrett's voice was heavy with emotion. I loved Elena, gave her everything I could. I thought we were happy. When she filed for divorce, it devastated me. I didn't handle it well. I'll admit that. I drank too much, made mistakes. The incident at Mrs. Hayes' home. Can you describe what happened from your perspective? I went there to talk to Elena. I'd been drinking, which was wrong. I know that. When I got there, I was emotional. We argued. Her mother got involved. I never meant to hurt anyone. When Mrs. Hayes fell, I was horrified. I left because I was scared. I should have stayed and called for help. That's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. Garrett's performance was masterful. He projected hurt, not anger, remorse, not defiance. Winters continued, what about the allegations of harassment, the texts, the phone calls? I tried to reach out to Elena, to apologize, to see if we could work things out. I never meant those messages as threats. I was just desperate to communicate with my wife of 30 years. Ex-wife, Catherine interjected. Judge Crawford nodded. Sustained. The parties are divorced. Garrett's mask slipped slightly. Ex-wife, I'm sorry. It's hard to think of her that way after so long together. Winters wrapped up quickly. Mr. Morrison deeply regrets his actions. He's enrolled in anger management. He's seeing a therapist. He wants nothing more than for everyone to move on peacefully. No further questions. Now it was Catherine's turn. She stood slowly gathering her notes. Mr. Morrison, you claim you loved your wife, yet you controlled every aspect of her life for 30 years. Can you explain that? I didn't control her. I took care of her. Managed the finances because I was better with money. Made decisions because she seemed to prefer it that way. She preferred having no access to bank accounts. She had access if she asked. So she had to ask permission to access marital funds. That's control, Mr. Morrison. Garrett's face tightened. I provided for her. She never wanted for anything. Except autonomy, independence, freedom. Catherine flipped through her notes. You sent 47 text messages over the course of the temporary restraining order. Messages saying things like, you'll regret this, and I'll be counting down the days. You call those attempts to apologize. I was emotional, not thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to use different phone numbers when Mrs. Morrison blocked your primary number. That shows planning, intent. I just wanted to talk to her. By threatening to burn down her mother's house? I never said that. Catherine held up a printout. Day 40, text message, that restraining order is just paper. Paper burns. What did you mean by that? Garrett shifted in his seat. It was a figure of speech. I didn't literally mean I'd burn anything. And when you showed up at the hospital when Mrs. Hayes was in intensive care, what were you trying to do there? I wanted to check on her. I was married to her daughter for 30 years. I cared about her well-being. You cared so much you violated a court order to see a woman you'd assaulted weeks earlier. It was an accident. I told you that. Catherine's voice sharpened. You accidentally broke into a private residence, accidentally destroyed property, accidentally shoved a 76-year-old woman so hard she required hospitalization. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. Exactly, Mr. Morrison. You weren't thinking about anyone but yourself. Not about Mrs. Morrison's safety. Not about her mother's health. Just about your own need to control a situation you could no longer control. Garrett's face was reddening. Elena recognized the signs, the tight jaw, the hands clenching on the witness stand, the barely contained rage. That's not true. I love Elena. Everything I did was because I love her. Love doesn't look like 3 decades of control and intimidation, Mr. Morrison. You don't understand. She needs me. Without me, she'll what be free, make her own choices, live without fear. She'll realize what she's throwing away. Garrett's voice rose. 30 years. 30 years I gave her everything and she throws it away for what? For some biker trash who probably doesn't even. Judge Crawford's gavel cracked. Mr. Morrison, control yourself. But Garrett was spiraling. Elena watched it happen like a slow-motion car crash. The careful mask shattering. The rage he'd been holding back finally breaking free. She's my wife, Garrett shouted, standing up in the witness box. We were married for 30 years. That doesn't just end because she files some papers. She belongs to. He lunged forward, pointing at Elena. The bailiff moved instantly, putting himself between Garrett and the courtroom. Douglas Winters grabbed his client's arm, hissing something urgent. But Garrett shook him off. This is ridiculous. I'm not the bad guy here. I provided for her, protected her, and this is how she repays me by dragging me to court, by turning everyone against me. She's destroyed my reputation, made me look like a monster when all I ever did was love her. Mr. Morrison, sit down immediately. Judge Crawford commanded, her voice like steel. No, I'm tired of sitting down, tired of being painted as the villain. Elena, tell them how good we had it. Tell them you're just doing this for attention, for sympathy, for. Garrett tried to step down from the witness stand, still reaching toward Elena. The bailiff blocked him. Another officer entered from the side door. She's turned you all against me, Garrett screamed at the courtroom. Can't you see? This whole thing is a setup. That biker, her lawyer, all of you. She's manipulating everyone. Bailiff, restrain the witness, Judge Crawford ordered. It took both officers to control Garrett as he fought against them, still shouting. This isn't over, Elena. You hear me? This will never be over. You're my wife, mine. You can't just walk away from me. They wrestled him into handcuffs. Garrett was still yelling as they dragged him toward the door. You'll come back. You'll realize you made a mistake. And when you do, when you come crawling back, The door closed, cutting off whatever threat he'd been about to make. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Judge Crawford removed her glasses, pinched the bridge of her nose, then looked at Douglas Winters. Counselor. Winters stood slowly, his face pale. Your Honor, and he apologized for my client's outburst. The stress of these proceedings, Judge Crawford's voice could have cut glass. Mr. Winters, your client just demonstrated in my courtroom exactly why Mrs. Morrison needs protection. He's violent, uncontrolled, and clearly believes his ex-wife is his property. She looked down at the evidence spread before her. I've heard enough. Catherine stood. Your Honor, given Mr. Morrison's courtroom behavior in clear violation of decorum, we renew our request for a 5-year permanent restraining order with additional provisions for granted. Judge Crawford's gavel came down. 5-year permanent restraining order. No contact. No communication through third parties. 500-yard minimum distance must be maintained at all times. Mr. Morrison is also held in contempt of court. Bailiff ensure he's processed for that before release. She looked directly at Elena. Mrs. Morrison, I apologize you had to endure that display, but I hope it gives you some comfort to know that what I just witnessed confirms every concern you have raised. This man is dangerous. This order will protect you. Elena couldn't speak, could barely breathe. 5 years. 5 years of legal protection. 5 years where Garrett couldn't come near her or her mother. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell one final time. Outside the courtroom, Elena stood on shaking legs. Cole's arm around her shoulders was the only thing keeping her upright. Catherine was already on her phone arranging for Garrett to be held on the contempt charges, making sure he couldn't make bail until tomorrow at the earliest. Judy sat on a bench, her face pale but triumphant. That man always did have a temper. Good thing the judge got to see it firsthand. I can't believe it's over, Elena whispered. I keep waiting for something else to go wrong. It's over, Cole said firmly. You're safe now, you and your mother, legally protected for the next 5 years. The reality of it slowly sank in. No more looking over her shoulder. No more jumping at every phone call. No more fear that Garrett would show up at her work, her home, the hospital. 5 years to rebuild her life without him casting a shadow over everything. 3 months later, winter had given way to early spring. Elena stood in Judy's backyard, her hands in the dirt planting roses. Not the old bushes that had struggled for years, but new ones. Vibrant reds and yellows and soft pinks that would bloom in a few months. Judy sat on the porch in her recliner, watching with satisfied eyes. Her health had improved slowly but steadily since the stress had lifted. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. No more heart attacks, no more emergency surgeries, just careful management in peace. You're getting good at that, Judy called out. Elena sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. Cole's been teaching me. Says gardening is therapeutic. Is it? Yeah, actually it is. The past 3 months had been a revelation. Without Garrett's constant harassment, Elena had discovered parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. She'd enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the community college. Terrible at it, but the act of creating something with her own hands felt revolutionary. She'd been promoted at the diner, shift supervisor now managing schedules and training new waitresses. Pete said she had a natural leadership quality. Elena had laughed at that, her A-leader. But she was learning how to make decisions without second-guessing herself, how to trust her own judgment. The diner's owner had approached her about expanding, adding a small bakery corner. Elena had always loved baking something Garrett had dismissed as a waste of time. Now she was developing a business plan, testing recipes, dreaming about chocolate croissants and sourdough loaves. Cole's truck pulled up to the curb. Elena's heart did its now familiar skip at the sight of him. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully. He never pushed, never demanded, just showed up every day steady and patient, waiting for Elena to be ready. He walked into the backyard carrying bags of mulch. Thought you might need these. My hero, Elena teased, standing to brush dirt from her jeans. Cole set down the bags, his eyes traveling over the half-planted rose bed. Looking good. The roses or meat bum? Both. They worked side by side for the next hour. Easy silence broken by occasional conversation. Cole talked about a custom motorcycle project he was working on. Elena shared a funny story from the diner. The kind of mundane, peaceful moments that felt like luxury after months of crisis. When the roses were planted and the sun was setting, Cole washed his hands at the outdoor spigot. Walk with me. They strolled through the neighborhood as dusk painted the sky in purples and golds. Houses lit up one by one. Families visible through windows, living their quiet lives. There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about, Cole said as they reached the small park at the end of the street. Elena's stomach clenched automatically. Months of peace, and she still expected bad news. Okay. Cole stopped at a bench, gestured for her to sit. I know we've been taking things slow, and that's good. Right. You needed time to figure out who you are without Garrett defining you. But, Elena prompted when he paused, but I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. I'm not just here until you're healed or until you feel strong enough to be alone. I'm here because I want to be. Because being with you, watching you become yourself again, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Cole, I love you, Elena. Not the broken version, not the scared version. Just you. The woman who plants roses and takes painting classes and is terrible at both, but does them anyway because they make her happy. The woman who fights for her mother and stands up in court and refuses to let fear win. I love you too, Elena whispered. The words felt enormous, terrifying, freeing. I think I have for a while now, but I was scared. After Garrett, I didn't know if I could trust my own feelings anymore. And now I know the difference. Garrett wanted to own me. You want me to be free. She took his hand. That's everything. Cole pulled her close and they sat on that park bench as night fell around them, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something new from the broken pieces. 1 year after the courtroom hearing, Elena stood in her own small apartment. Not Judy's house, not the cramped place she'd rented right after leaving Garrett. A real apartment she'd chosen herself, furnished with things she liked, painted colors that made her happy. The bakery corner at the diner had become so successful that Pete's boss had given her a raise. She was saving for culinary school. Maybe. Or maybe she'd just keep doing what she was doing, learning as she went, not needing formal validation to pursue what she loved. Judy was thriving. She joined a book club, started a small garden of her own. Still had her heart condition, still needed medication, but the quality of her life had improved dramatically. And Garrett, he'd violated the restraining order twice in the first 6 months. Both times the police had arrested him immediately. He'd served 60 days in jail, lost his job when the restraining order violations became public. The last Elena had heard, he'd moved 3 states away, finally accepting that she was truly beyond his reach. Now Elena stood in her kitchen, preparing dinner for a very specific occasion. Cole was coming over. She'd asked him to arrive at 7. The knock came precisely on time. Elena opened the door to find Cole holding flowers. Not roses, sunflowers. Bright and cheerful and exactly her favorite. Come in, she said, smiling. They ate the dinner she'd prepared. Lasagna from her mother's recipe, garlic bread, salad. Simple food but made with care. Over dessert, chocolate cake she'd baked herself. They talked about their days. Cole's latest motorcycle project. Elena's plan to expand the bakery menu. As Elena cleared the dishes, Cole stood and walked to the window. She recognized that stance, the one he took when he was thinking hard about something. Elena, he said finally, there's something I want to ask you. She turned dish towel in hand. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't get down on one knee. This wasn't that kind of proposal. Instead, he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. I know it's only been a year since the hearing, 18 months since we met, and I know you've spent the last year and a half finding yourself again, becoming who you're meant to be. But I also know that I want to spend my life with you, not owning you, not controlling you, just loving you and being loved by you. Elena's hand went to her mouth. Will you marry me? Cole asked simply. Will you build a life with me where we're partners, where you make your own choices and I make mine, and we figure out how to fit them together? Elena thought about Garrett, about 30 years of being told she was nothing without him, about the fear and control and suffocation. Then she thought about Cole, about the way he'd stood beside her, not in front of her, about how he'd helped her find her own strength instead of trying to be her strength. She thought about roses and painting classes and baking croissants, about her mother's book club and the garden they'd planted together, about freedom and choices and the life she'd built from ashes. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. Cole slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Not too tight, not too loose, just right. They stood in her small kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd learned to make bread, where she'd practiced new recipes, where she'd slowly remembered what it felt like to create instead of just survive. And they held each other as the city lights glittered outside and the future stretched before them full of possibility. 2 weeks later, on a perfect spring morning, Elena stood in Judy's backyard surrounded by blooming roses. Not in a wedding dress they'd decided on a small ceremony at the courthouse, just family and close friends, but in a simple yellow sundress that made her feel like sunshine. Cole stood beside her in jeans and a clean white shirt, his hand warm in hers. Judy sat in the front row oxygen tube, discreetly hidden beneath a colorful scarf, her eyes bright with joy. Bear and Dane and a handful of other former angels filled the other seats, these rough men who'd become family. The judge, not Judge Crawford, but a kind-eyed man who'd known Cole for years, spoke about partnership and choice and the courage it took to build something new. When it came time for vows, Elena spoke the words she'd written herself. I promise to choose you every day, to build a life with you, not for you, to be honest about what I need and what I'm feeling, to never lose myself again, but to find ways we can grow together without either of us becoming smaller. Cole's vows were simpler. I promise to stand beside you, to support your dreams, to protect what we're building together, to love you exactly as you are and exactly as you're becoming. They exchanged rings. The judge pronounced them married. And when Cole kissed her, Elena felt something she'd never felt in 30 years of her first marriage. Free. That evening, as the sun set over Judy's garden and the roses swayed in the breeze, Elena sat on the porch with her mother. Cole was inside cleaning up from the small reception they'd held. The sound of his laughter mixing with Bear's deep rumble drifted through the screen door. Happy? Judy asked, reaching for Elena's hand. Elena looked at the garden they'd planted together, at the house that had been her refuge, at the ring on her finger that represented choice, not chains. Yeah, Mom, I really am. Good, you deserve it. Took you long enough to figure that out. Elena laughed. Better late than never. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car drove past. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening. But for Elena Morrison, Elena Westwood, now ordinary, was extraordinary. After 30 years of walking on eggshells, after months of fighting for her freedom, after the long, hard work of remembering who she was, ordinary felt like victory. The porch light flickered on as Cole joined them, settling into the chair on Elena's other side. He didn't say anything, just took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Judy smiled, seeing them together. I think I'll head to bed. Leave you two lovebirds to yourselves. After she'd gone inside, Elena and Cole sat watching the night deepen. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across the garden. What are you thinking about? Cole asked. Elena considered the question. She thought about Garrett in some distant city, hopefully getting the help he needed. She thought about the composition notebook filled with evidence of his harassment, now stored away in a box in her closet, a record of darkness overcome. But mostly she thought about tomorrow, about the bakery menu she wanted to develop, about the watercolor painting class starting next week, about the life stretching ahead of her, full of choices she got to make. I'm thinking about freedom, she said finally, about how it's not just the absence of fear, it's the presence of possibility, of choice, of getting to decide who you want to be. Cole squeezed her hand. And who do you want to be? Elena smiled. I'm still figuring that out, but I've got time now, all the time in the world. They sat together as the night grew deeper, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and walked into the light. Behind them, the house glowed warm and welcoming. Before them, the future waited, full of promise. Elena Morrison Westwood had spent 30 years being afraid. Now she was done being afraid. Now she was just beginning to live. And that she thought as Cole pulled her close and the stars wheeled overhead was everything.